So we've had some fantastic guests this week so far for Journalism Media Week. But for me, our next one is my personal favourite. He played a massive part in an astonishing few years of football down the M62 at Huddersfield a few seasons ago. He's also... yeah, we'll part Leeds for a bit, just for an hour. He's also on the football club, Athletic. He's the CEO of Leicestershire County Cricket Club, and he's a Leeds Trinity alumni. So please, can you all give a warm welcome to Sean Jarvis?
It's a real honour, a real pleasure to be back at Trinity. I studied here. Class of '85 was my time here at Trinity, and it was an unbelievable experience, a truly magnificent place, and it gives me great honour to be back. And thank you for inviting me along what looks like a magnificent week, and sort of sharing the stage with some TV presenters is fabulous. So I hope I don't disappoint. I'm going to stand up because I'm quite a fidgety person, but I'm going to talk a bit about my journey, particularly around the media aspect, is what I've been asked to do. I've had a very varied career, and I'll touch upon that. But first of all, I kind of want to start with me. What influences me? And I'm a strong believer that we are influenced by the times that are around us. And this, for me, is what has kind of made me a person, really. I grew up very much a child of the 80s. I think if you put all those together, you can see what decade it was. So at the time, the Prime Minister was Margaret Thatcher. And the journey around that time was all about being entrepreneurial, being risk takers. Don't be risk aversive. Try and generate income for yourself. The music of the 80s, I think, was a big thing, and you're probably all a bit too young to remember them, but Duran Duran, great band. So the music of the 80s was a big influence for me. Technology and red braces was a big thing in the 80s, about that fashion sense, which kind of brings me on to the last one. And I guess with my green suit, I still probably keep a bit of that horrendous fashion sense that the 80s kind of delivered us. So I am a believer, as I say, what the influence that the period that you're born and bred in gives you. And your period that's going on in the economy and society now will influence you. So bear that in mind as I talk through my journey. And this for me is kind of my journey. I'm going to focus on a couple of bits in a moment. But I'm a Leicester lad. I was born and bred in Leicester in 1966, and then moved up here in '85 to Leeds Trinity. So I was from an Irish Catholic stock, and I was the first to move from our family to come to university. So it was a big move, but one I never looked back from. Once I left Trinity, I then moved into advertising agencies. And in the 80s, the boom of advertising was huge. And that's where all these red braces and technology came from. So I spent a lot of my apprenticeship, if you like, learning skills around media, PR in ad agencies. I then found myself gravitating towards sport. I love sport. I always grew up playing sport, cricket, football, rugby, from where I was from. So I then started to do some work with Super League, which is very big across the M62. And I was one of the individuals that was involved from the changing of rugby league from a winter sport into a summer sport. So the birth of the likes of Leeds Rhinos, Bradford Bulls, Huddersfield Giants, etc. From there, that sports experience then put me in good stead, and I then started doing work with the Premier League, in particular working around sponsorship deals. So the likes of Lucasade, Carling at the time. So again, getting a real feel for how organisations work. And those two organisations, those governing bodies, really put me in good stead and gave me a real skill set of where I could go from there. I then decided to move into almost be a poacher gatekeeper. So I then moved into a particular football club, Oldham Athletic. And I spent 7 great years there learning the trade about how we communicate with stakeholders, whether that be fans, investors, the media, so on and so forth. And in one particular, it's a story for another day, I actually owned a football club. I actually bought Oldham Athletic for £1. And it was exactly the same time that Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea. Now, that's where the similarity ends, I hasten to add. He's got a few more noughts in his bank account than I have. Once I left Oldham Athletic, I then moved to Huddersfield Town and spent nearly 15 years working at Huddersfield Town. I joined them in League One when they were languishing around the bottom of League One. And I'll talk about the media journey when I come on to the next few slides. And now I've kind of gone full circle. I've gone back to Leicester. Having spent 15 years at Huddersfield, I've now committed 5 years back to my hometown, the very first ground that I visited, and I'll finish on that in a bit later. So my focus today is really talking about that media journey, where we went through, what experiences we went through. When I joined Huddersfield Town, as I said, they were languishing towards the bottom end of League One. In fact, the very first game I went to see, it was against Yeovil, and I think Yeovil won 1-0, and there was a demonstration outside to remove the chairman at the time. And you could see why that was the case. There really was no engagement. Nobody was talking to the fans. Nobody was talking to the media. Nobody was really sort of inviting them into the club. No plan. It was almost kind of a day-by-day existence in terms of how it communicated. The mindset of the football club was, it's there, the fans will turn up, they'll come and watch our matches. The exposure that it got, because it was in League One, was fairly limited, unlike the Premier League, which we'll touch upon in a moment, but was mostly negative. So the papers, the back pages of the local press were very negative towards how Huddersfield Town performed and what they were doing within their community. So it's a real difficult situation. The facilities for the press at the time, even though it was a new stadium, were kind of shoved away in a little corner. And again, no real respect for those people who were voices for the club. And as I said, there's that kind of them and us sort of feel between the media and the football club. At that time, no social media. It wasn't really heard of, and everything was very kind of communicated through a programme that you would buy on a match day or read in the newspapers the following day. So very kind of old-fashioned, and as I've said there, traditional in its approach. So football club, we play football, we don't really want to communicate, come and watch us, and we'll leave it to you. So that's when I joined. And it was interesting, in the very first week, I met a councillor, a local councillor, who you'd expect somebody to be very pro the football club. And when I met him, first thing he said to me is, you, not me personally, but the football club, you've caused so much pain for this area. And I was curious what he meant by that. And it wasn't necessarily the results. It was kind of this lack of dialogue between the football club and its community. So it was a real eye-opener. So we had to change. That's a given. The club needed to change. The club needed to think differently about how it approached these problems. And also happened as well. There were things that were happening that forced us to make those changes, which I'll touch upon. So, what did we do? Where did we go from? So, take that situation where we were, and how do we move forward? Now, this is pre-Premier League times, and Premier League is another one, which I'll touch upon in a moment. So what did we need to do? We needed to create a media strategy. We needed to think about how is it we communicate to our press. And that's predominantly regional. Bearing in mind, we're League One, maybe getting close to the Championship. So it's all about how we had this dialogue with our local media. Creating content for them. So previously you'll have seen that they simply came along, watched the game, reported on the game. Invariably we'd struggle, but they would give out those negative stories. So it's very important that we now started to go on the front foot, to use a cricketing term, and actually create that content for the media. And that needed to be planned and sustained. It couldn't just be, there's a story, that's it, we can sit back and relax. It's about that continual bombardment of good quality stories that went through. In fact, I was at a Football League Awards with Huddersfield Town, and Mark Clemmett was the presenter, and we actually won an award. He stood up and said there was this tidal wave, tsunami of press releases coming out of Huddersfield at the time. So we began to change the media perceptions of Huddersfield Town. And I think one of the things that I saw was our staff didn't really identify the stories, weren't able to identify the stories. So I pulled in a couple of my old colleagues that worked in advertising agencies who gave them some advice about the stories that we sat on. And they really were 1,001 stories that we could have communicated. Everything from feral cats that come down to the training ground and how we've got them into a new homes, to players having milestones, to staff achieving certain awards, to record-breaking achievements that the club had made. So it was all those different stories that now we could actually communicate in press release form or even one-to-ones. So actually inviting the local media in, bringing them in, making them part of the journey that we were creating. So getting them to understand and feel part of the club. I always talk about people being the fabric of the club, and that's the supporters, the chairman, the press. They all need to feel part of the fabric of the club. And for us, well, what is the currency for a journalist? Well, that's stories. So if we can help them and assist them with the stories that we have, then we're going to help them do their job better and create the right kind of communication. What was interesting at the time as well was this in-house media channels. And it's interesting. One of the things that I noticed in my time at Huddersfield Town was that originally the media held all the power. So we'd give them a story, they would report on it, and it all come through their voice. What was happening now was this boom in things like the website, the app, social media, and Huddersfield Town TV. So we could start to control our stories. And what you were finding, and see to this day, is that channels that the football club and cricket club and other sports club control now actually communicate to the outside world, and media start picking up on those channels. It also meant that our media exposure that we control, we could monetize it as well. So subscription to the likes of HTTV, sponsorship around social media channels, all those sorts of things that meant that the football club could generate an income on the back of its media strategy. You saw earlier about how a local councillor was very derogatory towards the football club. What we then started to see was increase in civic pride. So people actually taking real pride in what Huddersfield Town were doing. So we communicated stories about how we were supporting our community through things like breakfast clubs for local schools, charity bike rides that we undertook. And all of a sudden, this civic pride started to build around Huddersfield Town. And actually, you know, there's a couple of Town fans in the room that probably felt that pride, that Huddersfield Town was a great football club and it was doing the right thing. And that was all through aggressive media relations and buying people in. As a consequence of our media strategy, you then saw a tendency started to increase. So the knock-on effects were manifold. We started to see people actually wanting to buy season cards and tickets at the club. We had to be innovative to try and drag people in, but you began to see how this media strategy had this real knock-on effect. And gates went from 8, 9, 10,000 up to 12, 13. Prior to going into the Premiership, it averaged around about 20,000. So this growth, again, a lot of factors, but the media strategy was a big thing. We also started to see the growth of commercial partners. So once you start communicating about the partnership that you would have with a local business, all of a sudden, another business kind of then goes, well, if they can have that, we want a bit of that. And of course, it costs them to have that privilege. So by that, again, PR, constant PR strategy, you actually saw, and we had something called the Huddersfield 100, that had 100 companies paying to have that privilege to be associated to the football club and get their moment of fame in the media through the PR strategy. What I would say is the press don't always get it right, though. And this was prior to the Premier League. Huddersfield Town had just got rid of a manager, Chris Powell. If memory serves me right, that's right.
Yeah.
Chris Powell, great guy, one of the nicest guys in football, didn't quite work out. And we at the board, we said we need something different. What is it we do to try and change the fortunes of Huddersfield Town? Because now we kind of moved up the football pyramid a little bit, but we were the bottom end of the Championship. So we needed to change our fortunes. So we thought, right, we'll go European. We'll try and bring in a different way of thinking. So we found a manager called David Wagner, who was the second team manager for Borussia Dortmund. Great guy, very forward thinking, a real pioneer of football at the time. Now, nobody really knew about David Wagner and what he looked like or anything like that. So what happened? Word had got out. This kind of noise had started to create in the media that Huddersfield Town, small club in the north, are bringing in a German manager, which was fairly big news, but nobody really knew what he looked like. Everybody kind of thought, well, heard he was 6 footish, grey, darkish hair, glasses, beard. I would say very handsome, but I'm slightly biased. Now, what happened on that day that we were due to announce David Wagner, I walked out of the boardroom onto the director's box and just looked down at the tunnel area, the two facilities for the managers, the dugouts for the managers, and there were hundreds of cameras there, all clicking away and kind of in our direction. And I'm thinking, David's not here. What is it? Anyway, next thing I know, I'm sort of sat down. We played Leeds United that day, by the way. I'm sat down in the director's box, and my phone starts buzzing. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I'm thinking, it's unusual. I left it, and it kept going. And I looked, and all the websites, BBC, Daily Mail, Daily Express, The Mirror, had all put a picture of me up on there, sort of saying I was the new boss of Huddersfield Town. And the message I got, were pretty abusive. So I would say, God help us if you're the manager of Huddersfield Town. So that's the closest I've got to managing a football team. But it just goes to show how a mistake can be easily made. Then we had a great season. We talked about it. The stars aligned at Huddersfield Town. Everything we seemed to go right. Recruitment of players, the connection with the fan base, corporate partners investing in the club, and was a very special moment Huddersfield Town, with a population of, I think, circa 160,000 in its town, very small team, managed to get to the Premier League, which was an unbelievable experience.
Can I just ask you a
Yes.
quick question about that date, Sean? So obviously you're a director at this point.
Yes.
You're in that press box watching a penalty shootout. Dean Oyle was on television looking like he's about to be sick.
Yep.
Patrick Stewart looks like he's about to clock out. What was the atmosphere like when you got hundreds of millions of pounds on a penalty shootout at Wembley to get into the Premier League?
Yeah, it was unbelievably tense. There was, I'll give you a little story. The team were deciding, they hadn't decided who was going to take the penalties. David didn't believe in that. Maybe that's the German way, I don't know. But he didn't believe in that. So he actually went and asked them at that moment and said, right, who's going to take the penalties? He wanted to see people step up to the plate. So all the lads came forward. The last one to step forward was a lad who we had on loan from Chelsea called Casey Palmer. He stepped forward and said, I'll take the fifth. And David Wagner looked at him and said, are you sure? David Wagner could see they was incredibly nervous. And Casey was a bit hesitant, said, yeah, I'll do it. And then he asked him again. And Casey again was nervous. And then Chris Schindler, who took the penalty, he stepped forward and said, no, I'm the captain, I'll take it. So that fella, it was the very last kick of the game, that fella hit the ball into the back of the net, was 180 million plus shot into there. Us in the Royal Box, couldn't believe what was happening. I mean, we'd gone through it a few years before with Sheffield United. But just the feeling, the emotion of being promoted. And I remember Dean coming into my office a couple of days later, once the hangover had gone, asking me, did I think we'd do it? And we always sort of said we'd hoped, but actually never quite believed what it was. And just the euphoria around the town, the civic pride, the lifting of the town was unbelievable. And you know, people just wanted to be part of the Huddersfield Town journey. So, amazing experience. I actually wore a heart monitor that was brought.
Oh, was that the one on the screen?
On the screen. So it was on the big screen. Sky Sports had approached me and said, would you do me a favour? Will you wear a heart monitor? I said, yeah, of course. I didn't realise it was going to be on the screen. And bearing in mind, this is me sat in a seat, my heart went to 182. So, I think that's equivalent of running a marathon, isn't it? There was a fella from Reading, I think he had a heart rate of about 60. He was like, got ice running through his veins. But an unbelievable, truly unbelievable experience. And with that, then came a huge amount of media demands, like you wouldn't believe. We were unaware of really what would come. We should have been aware, but we were unaware of what was going to happen. And everything from the media box. So all of a sudden, we talked about those media facilities that were very poor years ago. Now we had to create a whole media suite because you had so many different channels from around the world visiting the club. And one of the things we had to do was at the back of one of our stands, we actually had to change that media platform because it used to hold probably about 5 or 6 different media companies in the Championship or League One. Now we had to accommodate for potentially 126 different countries that would actually come and film Huddersfield Town. And we got to 126 when Huddersfield Town beat Manchester United at the John Smith Stadium, which was absolutely amazing experience. But we also had things like a Japanese TV crew. Japanese TV crew, I don't know whether it still happens, but goes to every single Premier League game. Every one, not just Huddersfield Town, but every club in the Premier League, home and away, there is a Japanese TV crew. So there's this insatiable appetite for British football around the world. So we had to create a skybox, we had to create facilities for pre and post-match interviews. And it meant, I think it was about 6 different boxes that after a game, and I can understand why managers get a little bit angry after matches, because it's not just one interview they do, they actually repeat it about 6 different times because of the TV deal rights that they have with the other broadcasters. So they actually repeat that story maybe 6 or 7 times. It might be more now. What we then saw, apart from this regional strategy, was now a global strategy. The world's media were honing in on Huddersfield Town, and the US was a big one. And it's interesting, the dynamics are very different between the different areas. The US are very protective of their MLS, but they've got this curiosity around the Premier League. They almost want to learn from the Premier League and take it to the MLS. So we're beginning to see how American TV and media wanted to sponge off us and then benefit the MLS, which I believe is what you're beginning to see. For us, what was interesting as well, we were starting to see, because of this exposure, little pockets of Huddersfield Town supporters appearing in California, Florida, New York. And it's almost like little seeds starting to grow around the world. And so much so, I remember, and I did a TV interview for US Fox Sports, or what it was, when we got promoted. And I remember getting out my car at the John Smith Stadium, and this guy from Michigan had come up to me. Mr. Jarvis, it's lovely to meet you. I shan't do an American accent. Lovely to meet you. What a real privilege it is to be here. And he'd travelled. He'd seen us on the TV, and he'd travelled from the States, from Michigan, to come and watch his now team, Huddersfield Town. Unbelievable. And that's just one example, one small example. To this day, we've still got little pockets of supporters. I think had we stayed in the Premier League, they would have just grown and grown and grown. China has an insatiable appetite for British football. And for me, I actually went out to Shanghai, Shenzhen, and I was treated like a movie star. It was unbelievable. And that's simply because they'll have seen me on HTTV. They absolutely love British football. So for us, we started to see again those pockets. And we have a supporters group in a little village not far from Shenzhen. Europe, because we had a German manager, we had Danish footballers. Danish was a big one. We had Jonas Lossell, Phil Billing, to name a couple that were Matthias Zanka, who were all Danish players. So again, we now started to see, because of the media exposure, little pockets of supporters started to become Huddersfield Town fans in those areas. And we actually did a deal with a JD Sports equivalent in Denmark to sell our shirts. So again, the knock-on effects. And then Australia, Aaron Moy, obviously a big Australian player, played for the Socceroos. Again, natural sort of evolution that Australian supporters would begin to gravitate towards Huddersfield Town. So we had to maximise that, and we saw little social media channels pop up all around Aaron Moy and about his experiences at Huddersfield Town. So this global media now descended onto little old Huddersfield. Well, I think I'm frozen. Have I pressed something? Maybe next one. Thank you. So it's a brilliant journey, magnificent journey. And for me, spending 14, 15 years, I learned so much about how you handle media, how you get them close to you, how you can control the media channels as well that you have. But my time was coming to an end. We got relegated, sadly, and I'd probably done my time at Huddersfield Town. In that period of me starting to exit the football club, I I got approached by my hometown team, which was Leicestershire County Cricket Club. It was the very first ground that I went to as a kid. My dad took me there. His ashes are actually scattered at the ground, so he haunts me every single night at Grace Road. But it's time for me to actually give something back to my hometown. So I've become chief exec to Leicestershire County Cricket Club. And again, just kind of focusing on the media part of Leicestershire. When I arrived, it was clear. It's almost like a repeat of what happened with Huddersfield Town all those years ago, 15 years ago. Again, no engagement. We're a cricket club. We play cricket. Regarded, the perception of Leicestershire was that of the 18 first-class counties, it's kind of the runt. Don't really listen to them. So its voice was very small. What was its purpose? It had a lot of what we call cold pack players. So we weren't developing talent from our academy. We were just getting journeymen to play in the team. And it had no real identity. There was no colour scheme. Nobody really knew what it stood for. So it kind of lost its way. So what we've done, what we've started to create is, from a national perspective, making our voice heard. So if there are any cricket followers in the room, you'll have seen a lot of information around what's called the High Performance Review. So I was very keen for us to sort of get our opinions out there, and that got picked up by BBC, Daily Telegraph, The Times, about Leicestershire's position. So all of a sudden, we started to get that presence both nationally and regionally. Similar sort of approach to Huddersfield Town. Equally, good thing about the cricket club is actually bring in players, overseas players. So Vian Mulder in South Africa, we're signing a couple of a Pakistani opener and an Indian opener next year. So you begin to see how we can actually start to take our brand over the world. For us, again, it's not just about telling a story, issuing a press release. It's actually about creating those messages, where you want to be. And for us, we're the most successful T20 side. Fox's TV, how we communicate from that. And I think our subscribers are now the highest in cricket. We wanted to create an academy of cricket, a bit like West Ham has down at the London Stadium. We want to develop an MBA in cricket administration, which will be a global first. And about engaging its community as well, which is huge in cricket at the moment. So what are the results of our efforts over the past couple of years? Well, this gentleman up on the right-hand side, mark my words, he will play for England. He's just been picked to play for the England Lions, Rayan Ahmed. Great little player, come through our ranks. He's only 18. He has a very, very bright future. So for us, it's about bringing those players through and communicating that story. We're seeing a lot of local businesses now starting to engage because we are raising our profile in the right way. The fella on the left is a guy called Sol Buddinger. He played for Nottinghamshire. And in the past, Leicestershire always used to lose its players to Nottinghamshire. So Stuart Broad went and played for Nottinghamshire. We're now beginning to see the other way round. So Sol Buddinger, who Nottinghamshire didn't want to lose, has come and signed for us. So the tables are turning, and Sol loves the journey that we're on. Gentleman in the middle, Alfonso Thomas, regarded as one of the best coaches in cricket, bowling coaches in cricket. He's now wants to be part of our journey and joining us. And then either side of those, you've got some of the stats around corporate sales, our consumer sales, ticket membership on the up, C&B, so all the facilities at the club. And then what we're seeing is more kids in our community playing cricket, what's called chance to shine programs. We're seeing women and girls cricket take off with the 100. So the direction of travel very similar to Huddersfield Town, and that's through not just what goes on behind the scenes. It's through that constant, sustained, planned communication of Leicestershire. What does the future hold? Well, something I'm very, very keen for us to do is create a new ground for Leicestershire, and this just gives you a little bit of our journey. So instead of being that old little cricket club, we're now starting to create the right kind of vision for Leicestershire and how we want to drive it forward and take it into the next century, if you like.
Okay.
I think that is me done. That's just a little snapshot of my journey, and I've tried to give it a little bit of a media stance. So it's been a fascinating one, which started here, and it gives me great pleasure, I think, to come back and actually chat to you guys. So it's over to you.
Well, I've just got a quick question, and then I'll see how many questions you get from the floor. Yeah. You mentioned a lot about these partnerships. One of them I was a bit interested to know about was when Town got relegated from the Premier League, there was the deal with Paddy Power, and that looked like a bit of a difficult week one way or another in terms of managing that relationship.
Yeah, the Paddy Power sponsorship deal was an unbelievable experience. And what I mean by that is we'd been relegated from the Premier League, so we still had good stock value. There was still a lot of people interested, but we had a conversation with Paddy Power about could we do something different to keep our profile out there. So Paddy Power and myself and a couple of other colleagues talked about an initiative that could get some great exposure. And what it was, and it was very top secret, sort of casting my mind back now, was that they wanted to put a huge sort of sash across Huddersfield Town's kit and announced that as a sponsorship deal. But it was illegal. We knew it was illegal, and it was always a part of a ploy to actually say that betting doesn't belong on the front of the shirts. And what I mean by that, you'll see. So on the Monday, we announced Paddy Power were to be our shirt sponsors, and that was greeted with pretty much positivity by our fans. So saying, oh, great, okay, national brand, great. Yeah, we understand betting on the front of shirts. Great, good money for the club. On the Wednesday, we revealed the kit. And the kit was the famous blue and white stripes, but with this huge banner across the front. And the positivity turned to immense negativity, to the point where every Huddersfield Town fan hated it because it looked so horrendous. And if you Google it, you'll see what the shirt looks like. And people were vying for blood. And it's all part of the plan, but they were vying for blood. And of course, I was in the firing line. And what you saw is this huge media exposure, national TV, about saying how on earth could a football club allow this to happen? It's horrendous. Betting companies have gone too far. And that had gone around the world. It was on BBC TV in the morning. And I was getting my inbox going ping, 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 with you should be fired, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. Horrendous. And we had a game, a friendly versus Rochdale that evening. And you saw social media turn a little bit, where people then went, this is not real. This is a kind of fake. It's a Paddy Power joke. It'll all get sorted. Anyway, we produced, I think 15 of these fake kits with a big sash on the front to play that night. So the fans expected us to run out in the kit with the real branding on. But we ran out with these fake shirts with these huge sashes. And the fan, I think there were probably about 1,500 fans had gone that night. And they all started chanting, "What the effing hell is that?" So I'm sat there and kind of pretending to be really distraught about it. So the fans, again, it almost reinvigorated this hatred towards me and what we'd done as a club. We'd almost sold our soul. And I disappeared. I came off social media for a short period of time. I even had staff. Even staff didn't know what was going on. So I even had staff looking at me and thinking, "He's gone mad. What on earth has he done?" And then so we let it run for another day. So this whole social media influence about what on earth have Paddy Power and Huddersfield Town done. Then on the Friday, we revealed that actually betting companies shouldn't be on the front of shirts. And it was all a hoax to try and get that message across. So then we revealed what the real kit was, which was a plain shirt without Paddy Power on. Paddy Power would have played the privilege to have their logo on the front of the shirt, but said it's not right that they should be on the front. So I went from being probably the most hated man in Huddersfield to the most worshipped man, because all of a sudden we delivered a shirt that had no sponsors on, that was all about the blue and white stripes, that the fans absolutely loved. And ordinarily, to give you an indication as to what the impact of that was, ordinarily you would circa sell maybe about 150, 200,000 pounds worth of shirts for a club the size of Huddersfield Town when you actually reveal your shirt. We actually sold 1.2 million. So it was sixfold in terms of that impact, which was income that obviously went back into the football club. And it was all about the message that we believed betting shouldn't be on the front of football shirts. Yes, it has a place, as long as it's controlled, but shouldn't be on the front of the shirts. We actually sold the fake shirts as well for, I think, something like 50, 60 grand that went to 4 local charities. So it had a double whammy as well. So it was an interesting week, to say, and I grew a few. Even though I knew what was going on, I was petrified for my life. But
yeah, I remember it being on BBC Breakfast and thinking, bloody hell, this has gone quite big. Has anybody got any questions?
Got a couple on at the back too.
Hi, I wanted to ask, you seem quite proud about where you come from Leicester. I consider myself quite proud of where I come from as well. And I wanted to ask, I'm quite terrified of losing that part of myself, coming here to university, to a big city. Yeah. How do you overcome those challenges?
Wow, great question. It's really interesting comment. Whereabouts are you from?
I'm from a town called Nantwich in Cheshire.
Yeah, I know it. Beautiful, lovely part of the world. Yeah, it's fascinating actually, and I'll give you an experience that I never thought I would do. I actually spent 15 years at Huddersfield Town, and we actually played Leicester City. I grew up watching Gary Lineker, Alan Smith, and deep down, sorry, Town fans, I actually am a Leicester fan. But I remember when Huddersfield played Leicester in the FA Cup, and I'd invited my brother, who still lives in Leicester, to come and be my guest in the boardroom at the King Power Stadium. And the weirdest experience happened to me when actually Huddersfield Town won. Sean Scannell scored a great goal, knocked out Leicester City. When he scored that goal, I found myself going, yeah, get him. And my brother's sat there like this, looking at me saying, what on earth are you doing? You're a Leicester lad. So it was weird. It was a real weird experience. But deep down, I'm always a Leicester lad. I'm a Fox, Leicester's home of the Foxes. So it's in there. It's in there. And I'm fortunate. My career path has been very lucky. Now I've got the chance to give something back. And I think we should all do that. We should all try and give something back to our hometown. The journey, when that is, whenever you can do that, do that. It might be later on in life. For me, this is my winter of my career. And I'm fortunate if I've got the opportunity to give something back. What happened? I'll tell you the tale. I was a non-exec director of Leicestershire for a year. And I said to them, I'll give you a year of my service to try and help you, because I picked up valuable experience at Oldham and Huddersfield, to name but two. And I said after a year I'd come back to Yorkshire and carry on with Huddersfield Town. But the chairman at the time, Mahmouda, she, as I was coming to the end of my year, she collared me and said, look, we don't want you to leave. We want you to be chief exec of Leicestershire. And it was a real tough decision, because I'd spent 15 years at Town, giving them blood, sweat and tears. But how could I not help my home team? And I think for me, it was the right time, right place for me to try and give something back. So with Nantwich, I'd say to you, when the time is right for you, give something back. Enjoy your time here, because I loved it, even though I still hate Leeds United. I loved it. I had a great time here. I still live up here. My wife and family. I actually married a young lady that was from Trinity as well. So enjoy the experience. But deep down, you'll never, ever lose that Nantwich in you. Not that I'd settle in Leicester anymore, but it's still my hometown. It's where I was born. I think there was a question at the top as well. You have to get your steps up.
In terms of English cricket, is there enough talent coming through the ranks at county level that are able to make it at national level? And can we compete with franchises like the IPL? And also, what do you make of England's chances down under tomorrow?
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. That's such a huge question in cricket at the moment. Cricket is, I think, going to face a major change in the next few years. What used to be the powerhouse was the ECB. So English cricket used to almost dominate cricket around the world and follow the tune, the others followed the tune of that. Now it's the BCCI, the Indian Cricket Board. Simply because what you're seeing is billionaires buy into IPL teams in cricket. So the power base is now with Cricket India. And we played India in a pre-season prior to the fifth test at Old Trafford. And the impact that we saw through our streaming was unbelievable. Ordinarily, we'd maybe get around about 10,000 people watching a cricket game if we streamed it live. We actually got 2 million purely through having a friendly versus India. So I think you're going to see Indian billionaires start to purchase English cricket counties. Where that will go, I don't know. Cricket clubs are membership run, so it's quite complicated. Is the talent coming through? Yeah, I think there is. I think there is talent coming through, but it needs to change. What cricket has been in the past has been a lot of private school kids that have had the facilities, cricket facilities, that have come through to the teams. Now we've created a scheme in association with the ECB called County Talent Champions. So we're identifying kids within our inner cities that are now being signposted to go and play for cricket teams that eventually they can get on the pathway. We've actually got 2 that have come through our inner city that, had we not spotted, would have been lost to cricket, and now in our academy setup, who are brilliant players. Rayan Ahmed, who I think will play for England. You'll see him in a few years. He's on the England Lions tour this winter. He epitomises where cricket needs to go. State school kid who's brilliant at cricket, who we need to get into the pathway, which is happening. So I think you'll see this talent come through. My concern is going to be, will that talent be whack bang 20 over cricketers, or will it be technical Alistair Cook type cricketers? That's my concern. At the moment, there is this shift towards white ball cricket as opposed to red ball cricket, hence the high performance review. So it's incredibly complicated. But I think there is talent in the UK. There are 1.7 billion people watch or engage with cricket, second to football, only just. So cricket has got an insatiable appetite. I'm seeing the birth of cricket in America. Europe, Denmark, Germany is starting to mushroom. Scandinavian countries starting to mushroom. So cricket's growing. Participation's growing. It's how we make sure that England can compete at all levels. In answer to your question, tomorrow, I noticed Pakistan got through to the final. I mean, having India versus Pakistan in a final would be unbelievable. But I'm an Englishman, so I'm going to support England. I think they can win it. I think England can be a bit flaky, but they've got the ability, they've got the big hitters all the way through. So even down at 7 and 8, they've got strike rates of 138, so they can turn a game very, very quickly. For me, Adil Rashid will be the one that will actually carry us through tomorrow, in my opinion, if he's picked. But we'll see. But I think England can go all the way and win it.
Okay, we've just got time for one last short question, because I think we've got to wrap up in a minute.
Yeah. Sorry, I do talk
right.
a lot.
No way.
Hi. So with your thing that happened with the press years ago, perception is everything in the media. How did you correct your perception in the media after that little hiccup with the media that happened? What was your correction? What was the journey that you went on to correct it in front of them?
In which one? Just give me the...
The one what was it? The pictures.
The picture of you with Dave Wagner.
Oh, David Wagner, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't remember his name.
Yeah, that's all right. It was... I made fun of it. I actually contacted them and sent them a picture of me and David Wagner and said, I think you need to change it a little bit. And they were appreciative. I think that, they one or two apologised, and that's fine. I didn't mind. But you respond quickly. So that evening, I remember sending a couple of pictures and say, I can understand the similarity, but he's far better looking than me. And so you kind of deal with it in a humanised way, really. A lot of people are scared of the press. You can't be, Yes, they're there to report and get both sides. But I think it's about, if you treat them with common sense, dignity, and treat them as human beings, they'll help you as well. Equally, they'll give you the chance. If there is a bad story, they'll give you the chance to actually comment on that as well, rather than just print it. So it's about building those relationships. And in that one with David Wagner, it was just literally sending them a picture. I actually had a picture of me and David, and he's to this day still calls me twin. He is far better looking than me. But it was just a case of letting them know the real David Wagner, not the fake one.
Okay, so thank you very much, Sean. That's been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, my pleasure.